Hi, and welcome to this episode of John's Motorcycle Rescue and Review. Today I'm going to be reviewing Suzuki's 1982 GS1100G motorcycle. The GS1100G was an evolution of Suzuki's own GS1000G motorcycle. As such, it features the shaft final drive. It also uses a 2-valve per cylinder version of Suzuki's GS1100 motor that was featured in quite a few of their bikes. The 2-valve per cylinder motor in this traces its roots back to the original 2-valve per cylinder GS750E motor of the mid-70s. Power output from the big 1100cc motor was right around 92 horsepower and 64 foot-pounds of torque. Quarter-mile times for the GS1100G ranged in the 12-second flat range at right around 115 miles an hour. This bike features a very slick-shifting 5-speed transmission. The G was really designed as a big GT style bike. It's a big UJM. It's a bike that you can get on and really go anywhere. The G model has a large fuel tank and it has right around 180-mile range before you hit reserve. So it's got a nice range on it for a bike of the time period. In the braking department, the GS1100G features big single-piston calipers up front. It has dual rotors. I've upgraded this brake with Spiegler brake lines, and so the stopping power is actually very good for a bike of the era, and it really does stop nicely. Out back, the GS1100G features standard style shocks. It has the twin shocks, and it also features a big disc brake out back with a single piston caliper acting on that. Suspension wise, this bike has air assisted front shocks, and you can adjust the air pressure to adjust the damping and the spring rates in those. What I've done on this particular bike is I have removed the original springs and I've replaced those with progressive springs, and then I spent a lot of time tuning the length of the spacers to get the right compromise for me as far as minimal dive under braking and a firm but comfortable ride. I've also replaced the rear shocks on this bike with some MGO units just because the original units were shot. Weight-wise, the GS1100G weighed in at right around 565 pounds. It was about 30 pounds, give or take, heavier than the GS1100E model. On this particular bike, I'm running a 4-into-1 Delcovic exhaust, in addition to sounding much better than the stock exhaust. With the replacement of the original exhaust and the weight loss there, this bike now weighs in right around what a stock GS1100E weighed back in the day. All right, enough talk. What is this bike like to ride out on real roads? I'm going to gear up. I'll bring the camera along. Let's find out together. Let's ride.
I am currently riding Suzuki's 1982 GS1100G, and the first thing I'm struck by is how comfortable this bike is and how easy it is to manage. All the controls are light. It's got a very roomy cockpit with a broad seat. The seat is all-day comfortable. It gives you plenty of room to move around on. Another thing that's very apparent as soon as you get on this bike is that motor. And it's got a very smooth motor, and even from low RPM, when you roll it on, it picks up so nicely and so cleanly. I'm running the Delcovic pipe on this bike. I've gone one size up on my main jets and one size up on my pilots. And I'm running the stock airbox. Everything just functions together very, very nicely. I've got no hiccups throughout the power band. Another nice feature on this Suzuki is the constant velocity carbs, and they are much easier to keep in tune than the slide type carbs on some of the earlier bikes. The shaft drive on this bike is not really noticeable from the cockpit. When you're riding it, it does not adversely affect the handling, and this bike is very easy in the corners. Nice brakes. They really are up to today's standards. And this is what I have this bike set up to do. And it's incredibly entertaining on tight back roads, and it acquits itself very well. Once you get into high-speed sweepers, that's not really this bike's forte, and I would say you almost need wind protection of a sport bike to have confidence in the high-speed sweeper type riding. The instrumentation on the Suzuki is fantastic. It's got the big speedometer, it's got the big tach, it's got a very nice fuel gauge, as well as a gear indicator. It also has a side stand light to tell you if your side stand is down. That's a nice safety feature. It has self-canceling turn signals. And all of these little nice touches really add up to make this a fabulous place to be. And it's a place where you don't have to compromise. Stock GS1100s, both the E model and the G model, were very, very plush on their suspension, and they really soaked up the bumps well, but things could degrade when you started to really kind of push them, and they tended to dive quite a bit under braking and rear up quite a bit under acceleration. Now, I have firmed up the front and back ends of this bike, and it now has minimal dive under braking, has very good control in the corners, but it does ride a little bit firmer than the stock ones, but that's a price I'm willing to pay. The transmission on this bike is a 5-speed unit. It is one of the slickest shifting short throw shifters in all of motorcycling. They're just fantastic in these bikes. With the Delcovic pipe on it, this bike really sounds nice. It's definitely louder than stock, but it sounds like a proper 1100 should. And the real-world power that this 2-valve per cylinder motor delivers is very, very nice. It always has power where you want it. You don't have to downshift 3 gears to be in the power band that you want. And you really dial it up with your throttle hand, and it's not shifting intensive at all. That makes the bike very relaxing to ride. I often drive this bike up in the mountains on twisty mountain roads with switchbacks and on some pretty technical pavement, and this bike just excels in that scenario. I think that's one area where the current setup pays off with the stiffer suspension and the better brakes. bike is very smooth on and off throttle. There is minimal driveline lash. And again, that smoothness just makes it easier in the corners. This bike will easily pull right up to redline in top gear, and that's probably around 135 miles an hour or so.
Alright, man, what a lot of fun. I always enjoy throwing a leg over the GS1100G and getting out and hitting some of Pennsylvania's finest back roads and country roads. It's comfortable enough that I can ride this bike all day long in a wide variety of riding situations, and this bike has been incredibly reliable. It's been a good, solid performer. It's just been a great bike over the years that I've owned it. Because the GS1100G was never the fastest bike in Suzuki's lineup or the sportiest bike in their lineup, it kind of gets overlooked on the classic bike market. And I really think that these represent a great value. If you take one of these and you do just a couple of modifications like I've done, you get a very competent sporting motorcycle, and you don't have to pay the purchase price like you would for a GS1100E or a Honda CB1100F. In real world riding, I don't have any issues keeping up with other riders on different bikes and even more modern bikes. In summary, the GS1100G is just a very well balanced package. It has all day comfort, excellent handling, excellent brakes. It has a motor in it that has all sorts of torque, all sorts of real world power, and a very broad power band. The 1100G also sports one of the best transmissions in the business. It's a slick shifting unit. It shifts great. And I love the Suzuki shaft drive that really allows a shaft drive bike to handle well. If you're looking at one of these on the used market, I would say there are a couple areas to watch out for. These were known for some electrical issues. I would suggest immediately replacing the stator and the regulator rectifier with Rick's units. This bike has 34,000 miles on it, and I did replace the original clutch. I used EBC units for that, and I would consider a clutch a wear item on a bike at that mileage. Well, I'd love to know what you guys think. If anyone out there is a GS1100G fan, or you've owned one in the past, please feel free to comment in the comment section below. As always, I hope you found this video entertaining and informative, and until next time, enjoy the ride.